The suitcase slipped from Ifeanyi Okonkwo's hand the moment he stepped into his courtyard. Under the blazing Lagos sun, his elderly mother, Mama Ngozi Okonkwo, was trembling on her knees, while his wife Amara shoved a stack of papers toward her. "Sign it," she snapped, "or you'll leave this house with nothing." Tears streamed down the old woman's face, but she refused to touch the pen. Hidden behind the gate, Ifeanyi heard every cruel word without either woman realizing he had returned home hours early. In that heartbreaking moment, everything he believed about his marriage began to collapse. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. We'd love to see how far this story travels across the world. And if emotional stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next journey. The city of Lagos never truly slept. Before sunrise, buses already filled the roads, market traders arranged their stalls, and construction crews gathered around unfinished buildings that reached toward the sky. Among those workers was Ifeanyi Okonkwo, a respected construction project manager whose reputation had been built not only on skill but also on honesty. Every laborer under his supervision knew he was a man who never asked others to do work he would not do himself. For years, Ifeanyi had believed that success meant providing a peaceful life for the two women he loved most, his wife Amara and his widowed mother, Mama Ngozi. After his father's death nearly 8 years earlier, he had made a promise beside the gravesite that his mother would never know hardship again. That promise became the quiet force behind every overtime shift every weekend, spent inspecting construction sites, and every sacrifice he willingly made. He had eventually saved enough money to renovate his late father's modest family house on the outskirts of Lagos. Although modern furniture replaced the aging pieces and fresh paint covered the cracked walls, one thing never changed. The property legally remained under Mama Ngozi's name because it had been built by her late husband decades before. Ifeanyi never considered changing that arrangement. To him, it was not merely a house. It represented his parents' lifetime of sacrifice. His mother never argued. She simply smiled whenever he mentioned it. "My son," she would often say softly, "a home is not measured by the name written on a document. It is measured by the peace inside its walls." Those words stayed with Ifeanyi. He believed peace already existed inside their home. Every morning before leaving for work, he found breakfast waiting on the dining table. Amara would hand him a packed lunch with a warm smile before reminding him to drive carefully. Mama Ngozi would offer a short prayer, placing one gentle hand on his shoulder. To anyone watching, they appeared to be the perfect family. Even the neighbors admired them. "They're blessed," people often whispered. "A hard-working son, a respectful wife, an elderly mother living comfortably." No one saw anything unusual, not even Ifeanyi. His job often required him to travel between construction sites across Lagos and neighboring states. Sometimes he left before sunrise and returned long after dark. During larger government projects, he could spend several days away supervising work. He always worried about leaving home. But every time he expressed concern, Amara laughed gently. "Don't worry about us," she would tell him. "Your mother is like my own mother. I'll take good care of her." Hearing those words always eased his mind. He had married Amara 5 years earlier after meeting her through mutual friends at church. She was intelligent, confident, and carried herself with remarkable grace. During their courtship, she treated Mama Ngozi with enormous respect. She brought small gifts. She listened patiently to old family stories. She even learned several traditional Igbo recipes because she knew they reminded Mama Ngozi of happier years. Everyone believed Ifeanyi had chosen wisely. Even Mama Ngozi welcomed the marriage with genuine happiness. "My son deserves someone who loves him," she had told relatives during the wedding celebration. and for a long time she truly believed Amara did. Their first years together seemed peaceful. The disagreements every couple experienced never appeared serious enough to threaten their happiness, or so Ifeanyi believed. Gradually, his career became more demanding. Construction contracts grew larger. His responsibilities increased. The longer hours brought better income, allowing him to renovate the house further and provide a comfortable life. He never noticed that each promotion also meant spending less time at home. Meanwhile, Mama Ngozi quietly adapted to life after losing her husband. At 68 years old, she remained remarkably active despite occasional arthritis that made climbing stairs painful. She woke before dawn every morning. She swept the compound. She watered the flowers her late husband had planted years earlier. She prepared breakfast whenever Amara slept late. She folded laundry without being asked. Although both Ifeanyi and Amara repeatedly told her she no longer needed to work so hard, she insisted that keeping busy gave her purpose. "I've spent my whole life caring for this family," she would smile. "My hands don't know how to rest." Her gentle spirit earned admiration throughout the neighborhood. Children greeted her respectfully. Street vendors often refused to charge her full price. Even strangers seemed drawn to the warmth she carried. She never spoke harshly, never complained, never raised her voice. If someone hurt her feelings, she usually responded with silence and prayer. That quiet strength had helped her survive years of financial hardship after her husband's death. She believed kindness always outlived cruelty. Amara often watched her mother-in-law from a distance. Sometimes her expression appeared thoughtful, sometimes unreadable. Ifeanyi rarely noticed. Whenever he was home, Amara behaved exactly as everyone expected. She called Mama Ngozi Mama. She served her meals. She smiled warmly whenever neighbors visited. If anyone complimented their close relationship, Amara accepted the praise modestly. "We're family," she would say. "That's how it should be." Those words spread quickly through the neighborhood. People admired her devotion. Several young wives even said they wished they could become daughters-in-law like Amara. Mama Ngozi never corrected them. Instead, she quietly lowered her eyes. Inside her heart, a strange uneasiness had begun to grow. It was difficult to explain. Nothing dramatic had happened. No explosive arguments, no obvious insults. Only small moments that disappeared before anyone else could notice them. A sigh after Ifeanyi left for work. A colder tone replacing yesterday's warmth. A request delivered more like an order. Tiny changes, almost invisible. Mama Ngozi convinced herself she was imagining them. Perhaps Amara was simply tired. Perhaps work had become stressful. Marriage required patience. She had told herself those same words countless times during difficult seasons with her own husband. So she chose understanding over suspicion. Every evening, Ifeanyi called home before returning from work. The conversations always sounded ordinary. "How was your day, Mama?" "It was peaceful, my son." "And you, Amara?" "Everything is fine." He never heard fear in his mother's voice. He never sensed hesitation before her answers. She deliberately hid both. After hanging up, she often sat quietly beside the window, watching the sun disappear beyond the rooftops. Sometimes she remembered the promise her late husband had made before his final illness. "If anything happens to me," he had whispered years earlier, "never let our son carry the burden of guilt. Protect his happiness whenever you can." She had never forgotten those words. To Mama Ngozi, protecting her son's happiness meant protecting his marriage. Even if doing so required swallowing loneliness, even if it required hiding her own pain. She believed temporary discomfort was a small price for family unity. Far away, Ifeanyi continued planning for the future. He dreamed of expanding the house, perhaps building a second floor, perhaps one day filling the home with grandchildren laughing through the corridors. Every exhausting day at work felt worthwhile because he imagined returning each evening to a family united by love. He had no idea that beneath the peaceful surface of his home, invisible cracks had already begun spreading through its foundation, and just like a damaged building whose deepest fractures remain hidden behind beautiful walls, the greatest danger was still impossible for him to see. The first time Amara's smile disappeared, it happened less than 5 minutes after Ifeanyi's car turned the corner at the end of the street. Mama Ngozi stood by the gate, still waving as her son drove away toward another construction project outside Lagos. She waited until the vehicle disappeared completely before quietly closing the gate. It had become part of her morning routine, a small ritual that reminded her she was still blessed to have a son who never forgot to kiss her forehead before leaving. As she turned toward the house, Amara's voice cut through the silence. "You're still standing there." Mama Ngozi looked back with a gentle smile. "I was just praying for his safety." "You can pray inside." The words themselves sounded harmless. It was the tone that made them heavy. Mama Ngozi lowered her eyes and walked into the house without another word. She had learned that answering back often made ordinary conversations uncomfortable. Inside the kitchen, breakfast dishes still covered the table. Normally, the two women cleaned together while chatting about neighborhood news or church activities. That morning was different. Amara pointed toward the sink. "Wash everything." Mama Ngozi nodded. "Of course." As she reached for the plates, Amara added another instruction. "And don't forget to mop the entire house afterward." Mama Ngozi paused for only a second. "I thought the cleaning woman was coming today. I canceled her." "Oh. We don't need to waste money paying someone when you're here all day." Mama Ngozi simply smiled faintly. "I understand." She rolled up the sleeves of her faded blouse and quietly began washing the dishes. Her fingers had grown stiff over the years because of arthritis. Cold water often made the joints ache, but she never complained. She reminded herself that helping around the house was not a burden. It was simply another way of contributing to the family. Hours passed. By midday, she had washed every dish, cleaned the bedrooms, swept the courtyard, mopped every floor, watered the flowers, and prepared lunch. Her knees hurt. Her lower back throbbed. Still, she carried the food to the dining table. "Amara," she called softly, "lunch is ready." Amara walked in without looking up from her phone. She glanced briefly at the table. "Is this all?" Mama Ngozi looked confused. "I made vegetable soup with pounded yam. It's your favorite." "I wanted fried rice." "You didn't mention that this morning." "I shouldn't have to repeat everything." Mama Ngozi immediately apologized. "I'm sorry. I can prepare it now." Amara sighed dramatically. "Forget it." She picked up her handbag. "I'll order food." The front door slammed shut. Mama Ngozi remained standing beside the table. She looked at the untouched meal and whispered almost to herself, "I wish she had told me." That afternoon, she carefully packed the food into small containers instead of throwing it away. Waste had always troubled her. She had lived through years when even one meal was difficult to find. Nothing should ever be discarded carelessly. When Ifeanyi called during his lunch break, Amara answered with cheerful enthusiasm. "Everything's wonderful." He laughed. "I hope Mama isn't overworking herself." "Oh no." Amara smiled while speaking. "I keep telling her to rest, but she insists on helping." Mama Ngozi sat quietly in the next room. She heard every word. She closed her eyes, but said nothing. That evening, Ifeanyi returned home tired after driving through the heavy Lagos traffic. As usual, Amara greeted him warmly. She took his briefcase. She hugged him. Mama Ngozi served dinner. Around the table, conversation flowed naturally. Everyone laughed when Ifeanyi described one of his workers accidentally dropping an entire bucket of paint onto his own boots. Even Mama Ngozi laughed. Watching her son smile erased much of the day's sadness. She convinced herself that tomorrow would surely be better. But tomorrow looked remarkably similar. And so did the day after that. Week by week, Amara slowly changed the rhythm of the household. She stopped allowing Mama Ngozi to sit and rest after breakfast. There are clothes to wash. There are windows to clean. The storeroom needs organizing. The garden looks untidy. Each task alone seemed reasonable. Together they became exhausting. Whenever Mama Ngozi finished one job, another immediately appeared. If she paused to catch her breath, Amara noticed. "You're moving very slowly today." "I'm sorry. If you're healthy enough to chat with neighbors, you're healthy enough to finish cleaning." Mama Ngozi quietly continued working. She never defended herself. Several times neighbors greeted her through the fence while she swept the compound. Mama Chinyere, the elderly woman living next door, often smiled warmly. "Mama Ngozi, you're still working harder than women half your age." Mama Ngozi laughed gently. "Keeping busy keeps me alive." Amara happened to overhear one of those conversations. The moment Mama Chinyere walked away, she stepped closer. "Next time, don't stand outside gossiping. We were only greeting each other. I don't like neighbors interfering in this house. They're only being kind." I said I don't like it. The conversation ended there. Mama Ngozi quietly returned indoors. Little by little, she stopped spending time outside the gate. She no longer lingered after sweeping. She no longer accepted invitations to drink tea with neighboring women. Isolation entered her life so gradually that she barely recognized it. Meanwhile, Ifeanyi's career continued demanding more of his attention. One afternoon, he received news that his company had won a major government contract near Ibadan. The project would last several months. It was the largest assignment of his career. He was excited. The promotion came with better pay, greater responsibility, and the possibility of becoming regional operations director. That evening, he shared the news over dinner. "I'll have to travel more often." Amara smiled immediately. "You've worked so hard for this." Mama Ngozi forced herself to smile too. "I'm proud of you, my son. If it becomes too difficult, I can decline." Both women answered almost simultaneously. "No." Ifeanyi laughed. "Then it's settled." He reached across the table and squeezed his mother's hand. "I'll make it up to both of you once the project is finished." "You already do enough," Mama Ngozi replied softly. She meant every word. Later that night, Ifeanyi packed his suitcase for another week away. Before leaving the following morning, he hugged Amara. Then he embraced his mother. "Please take care of yourself." "I will. And don't work too hard." Mama Ngozi smiled. "I'll rest." She hated lying to him. After his car disappeared once again, silence settled over the house. Amara waited only a moment before speaking. "The guest room." Mama Ngozi looked confused. "What about it? It hasn't been cleaned properly." "I cleaned it yesterday." "Then clean it again." Without another word, Mama Ngozi walked toward the room carrying a bucket and mop. As she bent to scrub the floor beneath the bed, pain shot through her lower back. She leaned against the mattress for support. Her breathing became slower. For a brief moment she considered sitting down. Instead, she whispered a prayer. "Lord, give me strength." Tears formed in her eyes, not because of the physical pain. She had survived much worse during her lifetime. What hurt far more was the growing feeling that she no longer belonged in the house she and her husband had spent decades building together. Still, every time sadness threatened to overwhelm her, she remembered Ifeanyi's smiling face before he left for work. She remembered the pride in his voice. She remembered how happy he believed his family was. That happiness had become something she felt responsible for protecting, even if the price was her own silence. What Mama Ngozi did not realize was that silence, no matter how noble its intention, often becomes the safest place for cruelty to grow. And with each passing day that Ifeanyi remained away, Amara became a little bolder, a little colder, and far more confident that no one would ever discover what truly happened inside the Okonkwo family home. The rainy season arrived in Lagos with heavy clouds that lingered over the city for days, but inside the Okonkwo home, the weather no longer determined the atmosphere. Whether the sun shone brightly or rain tapped against the windows, Mama Ngozi had begun waking each morning with the same quiet uncertainty. She no longer wondered what chores awaited her. She wondered what version of Amara she would meet. Some mornings, Amara barely spoke. On others, she criticized every small detail. Nothing Mama Ngozi did seemed good enough anymore. One Tuesday morning, Mama Ngozi carefully arranged freshly washed clothes on the clothesline in the backyard. She had ironed Ifeanyi's shirts the night before, folded the towels neatly, and swept the compound before sunrise. She thought perhaps she could finally sit down with a cup of tea. Before she reached the kitchen, Amara called from the living room. "Mama." "Yes." "The windows. I cleaned them yesterday. I can still see fingerprints." Mama Ngozi walked closer and looked carefully. The glass sparkled in the morning light. I don't see them." Amara pointed anyway. "I do." Without arguing, Mama Ngozi fetched another bucket of water. As she wiped each window again, her wrists trembled from fatigue. She noticed her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back seemed older than 68. The wrinkles around her eyes had deepened. Dark circles had appeared beneath them. Even her shoulders seemed slightly bent now. She quietly wondered when that had happened. It certainly had not happened all at once. Age, she thought, often arrived quietly. So did sadness. Inside the house, Amara watched through the window for a moment before returning to her phone. Her expression remained unreadable. To anyone entering the house at that moment, she would have appeared calm, even elegant. She knew exactly how to present herself whenever other people were around. That afternoon, several women from the church visited unexpectedly to invite Mama Ngozi to help organize a charity program for elderly widows. When Amara opened the door, her smile appeared instantly. "Aunties, please come in." The women greeted her warmly. "Is Mama Ngozi home?" "Of course." Amara walked toward the kitchen. "Mama, your church friends are here." Mama Ngozi quickly washed her hands and came into the sitting room. Her face brightened the moment she saw the familiar visitors. For nearly an hour they laughed together, discussing old memories and the upcoming charity event. One woman gently squeezed Mama Ngozi's hand. "We've missed seeing you." "I've just been busy." "You hardly come to church activities anymore." Mama Ngozi smiled politely. "There is always something to do at home." Amara entered carrying a tray of drinks. "I keep telling Mama to spend more time with her friends." The visitors smiled approvingly. "You're a wonderful daughter-in-law." Amara lowered her eyes modestly. "I simply do what any daughter should." Mama Ngozi remained silent. She stared at the cup of tea in front of her. The conversation continued pleasantly until the visitors left. The front gate closed. The smiles disappeared. "You talked too much." Mama Ngozi looked surprised. "They asked how I was." "You don't need to tell outsiders about this family." "I didn't. They'll start thinking you have nothing to do here." Mama Ngozi frowned gently. "I only answered their questions." Amara folded her arms. "Next time, keep the conversation shorter." Mama Ngozi simply nodded. "I will." That evening, Mama Chinyere happened to meet Mama Ngozi near the front gate while returning from the market. She carried 2 shopping bags overflowing with vegetables. "Mama Ngozi," she called cheerfully, "I bought too many tomatoes. Please take some." "Oh, thank you." Mama Ngozi accepted them gratefully. "You've always been generous." "Nonsense," Mama Chinyere laughed. "You've helped everyone in this neighborhood at one time or another." They stood talking for only a few minutes, mostly about church, about rising food prices, about the weather, nothing unusual. Yet from the sitting room window, Amara watched the entire conversation. That night after dinner, she spoke coldly. "I've already told you not to gossip outside." "We weren't gossiping. You seem to enjoy discussing this family." "I never said anything about us." Amara's voice hardened. "I don't like repeating myself." The room fell silent. Ifeanyi looked up from his meal. "What happened?" Amara smiled immediately. "Oh, nothing. I just worry that Mama stands outside too long. The mosquitoes are terrible this season." Ifeanyi nodded. "She's right, Mama. We need to be careful." Mama Ngozi forced a smile. "I'll remember." The subject ended there. Ifeanyi never noticed that his mother's smile no longer reached her eyes. As weeks passed, another change slowly appeared. Mama Ngozi began eating less, partly because she felt tired, partly because stress stole her appetite. She often waited until everyone else had finished before quietly serving herself a small portion. Ifeanyi occasionally noticed. "Mama, is the food not good?" She laughed softly. "I just don't eat as much these days." He accepted the explanation. Growing older changed people's habits. There seemed nothing unusual about that. One Saturday afternoon, Ifeanyi received an unexpected inspection request at a construction site nearly 3 hours away. He sighed while reading the message. "I'll have to leave again tomorrow morning." Amara immediately encouraged him. "You shouldn't disappoint your company." "I know." He looked toward his mother. "I hate being away so much." Mama Ngozi reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "Your father worked hard for this family too. I wish I could spend more time at home. You are building a future." Her words comforted him. He never imagined she needed comforting herself. The following morning, he packed another suitcase. Before leaving, he hugged Amara. Then he embraced his mother. "You'll call me if you need anything." "Of course." "I mean it." "I know, my son." He kissed her forehead. "I love you." "I love you too." As soon as the gate closed behind him, Mama Ngozi stood quietly watching the empty road. She whispered a prayer for his safety. Behind her came Amara's voice. "The kitchen." Mama Ngozi turned. "Yes. The cupboards need reorganizing." "I'll start immediately." She spent the next 4 hours removing every plate, every bowl, every cooking pot from the cupboards. She cleaned every shelf carefully before placing everything back exactly where Amara instructed. By evening, her hands were swollen. When she tried lifting a heavy pot onto the highest shelf, pain shot through her shoulder. The pot slipped. It struck the counter before falling onto the floor with a loud crash. The metal dented. Silence filled the kitchen. Mama Ngozi immediately bent down. "I'm sorry." Amara entered within seconds. She stared at the damaged pot. "You can't even hold a cooking pot anymore." "I'm very sorry." "Do you know how expensive that was?" "I'll replace it." "With what money?" Mama Ngozi lowered her head. She had no answer. Her small widow's pension barely covered personal necessities. Amara shook her head in disappointment. "You're becoming more careless every day." Mama Ngozi quietly picked up the pot. After Amara left the kitchen, she sat alone for several minutes. Not because of the pot, not even because of the harsh words. She was thinking about something else. She could no longer remember the last time Amara had spoken to her with genuine kindness when Ifeanyi was not present. The realization settled heavily inside her heart. Yet, even then, she refused to judge her daughter-in-law completely. Perhaps stress had changed her. Perhaps something else was wrong. Surely no one became cruel without carrying some hidden pain. Mama Ngozi chose compassion once again. She prayed not only for herself that night, but also for Amara. She asked God to soften the younger woman's heart. She asked for wisdom. She asked for peace. Outside her bedroom door, Amara walked past without noticing the whispered prayer. She believed control was growing easier with each passing week. The neighbors remained unaware. Ifeanyi remained trusting, and Mama Ngozi remained silent. To Amara, everything was unfolding exactly as planned. She did not yet realize that every hidden act, every cruel word, and every quiet humiliation was slowly creating witnesses she had never intended to leave behind. By the beginning of August, the atmosphere inside the Okonkwo household had changed so gradually that only someone returning after several months away would have recognized the difference. The house itself looked beautiful. Fresh flowers bloomed along the walkway. The walls had recently been repainted. The living room displayed elegant furniture that Ifeanyi had proudly purchased after receiving his latest promotion. Visitors continued complimenting the family's comfortable home. "Your husband has worked miracles," neighbors often told Amara. She would smile graciously. "God has been faithful." No one noticed that the greatest treasure inside the house was not the furniture. It was the land beneath it. The property had become one of the most valuable pieces of residential land in the area after a new highway project dramatically increased real estate prices. Several developers had already begun buying nearby houses, hoping to build luxury apartments. The value of the Okonkwo family property had quietly tripled within only a few years. Ifeanyi never paid much attention to those offers. Whenever agents knocked on the gate asking whether the family wanted to sell, he politely declined. "This is my parents' home," he always replied. "It isn't for sale." To him, the conversation ended there. To Amara, however, every offer planted another dangerous idea. One afternoon, while organizing an old wooden cabinet in the master bedroom, she searched for spare warranty papers for one of the household appliances. Instead, she found a faded brown envelope tucked beneath several family photo albums. Curious, she opened it. Inside were neatly folded legal documents. Her eyes moved slowly across the pages. Certificate of occupancy, property registration, land ownership records. Every document carried the same owner's name. Ngozi Okonkwo, not Ifeanyi, not both spouses, only Mama Ngozi. Amara frowned. She read every page again. Then a third time. There was no mistake. Legally, the entire property belonged to her mother-in-law. If anything happened to Mama Ngozi without changing those documents, ownership would eventually pass according to Nigerian inheritance law. Amara suddenly realized something she had never seriously considered before. Despite living in the house for years, despite decorating it, despite helping renovate it, she technically owned nothing. That evening she remained unusually quiet during dinner. Ifeanyi noticed. "Everything all right?" She smiled immediately. "I'm just tired." Mama Ngozi looked at her with concern. "Would you like some herbal tea before bed?" "No, thank you." The conversation moved on. But inside Amara's mind, new thoughts refused to disappear. Late that night, while Ifeanyi slept peacefully beside her, she quietly reached for her phone. She searched property prices in the neighborhood. Several listings shocked her. The amounts seemed unbelievable. Enough money to buy multiple houses, enough to open a business, enough to live comfortably for many years. She stared at the numbers long after midnight. Sleep never came easily that night. Over the following days, those figures remained in her mind. Whenever she walked through the compound, she no longer saw the home where her husband had grown up. She saw land, value, opportunity. One Saturday morning, another real estate agent visited unexpectedly. "I've been instructed by a developer," he explained politely. "If your family ever considers selling, our client is prepared to pay well above market value." Amara listened carefully. "What kind of price?" The agent mentioned an amount. Even though he was speaking calmly, Amara felt her heartbeat quicken. It was nearly double what she had imagined. She thanked him politely and accepted his business card. When Ifeanyi returned from work later that afternoon, she casually mentioned the visit. "They're offering a fortune." He barely looked up from removing his work boots. "It doesn't matter." "Don't you want to hear the number?" "No." She laughed softly. "You didn't even ask." "I don't need to." He poured himself a glass of water before continuing. "Some things aren't measured in money." She studied his face. "You'd never sell." He shook his head. "My father built this place with his own hands." "What if someone offered enough for us to buy an even bigger house?" Ifeanyi smiled. "A bigger house isn't always a better home." The discussion ended there, at least for him. For Amara, it had only begun. The next morning, while Ifeanyi attended a project meeting, Amara approached Mama Ngozi as she watered flowers near the front gate. "Mama." "Yes, my daughter." "I found some old property papers." Mama Ngozi smiled gently. "They belonged to your father-in-law." "I noticed they're still in your name." "Yes." "Have you ever thought about transferring everything to Ifeanyi?" Mama Ngozi continued watering the flowers before answering. "One day." "When?" "When the right time comes." Amara forced a pleasant smile. "Wouldn't now be the right time?" Mama Ngozi turned off the hose. Her expression remained peaceful. "My husband asked me to wait." Amara blinked. "He specifically told you that before he died." "What exactly did he say?" Mama Ngozi's eyes softened as old memories returned. "He said our son had a generous heart." Amara nodded impatiently. "That's true, but he also reminded me that life changes people." She looked toward the garden her husband had planted decades earlier. "He wanted me to keep the house protected until I felt completely certain it would always remain a place of peace." Amara folded her arms. "Surely you trust your own son." "I trust Ifeanyi completely." "Then why wait?" Mama Ngozi smiled kindly. "Because this house belongs to generations, not only one person." Amara said nothing else, but disappointment settled heavily inside her. That evening she replayed the conversation repeatedly. The old woman was not simply delaying. She genuinely intended to keep ownership, unless something changed. Several days later, Amara secretly met the real estate agent at a nearby cafe. "I have a question. I'm listening." "If someone wanted to transfer property ownership within a family..." The agent explained the legal process: signatures, witnesses, identity verification, documentation. Everything sounded straightforward, almost too straightforward. When the meeting ended, another man sitting nearby approached the agent. After a brief conversation, the agent introduced him. "This is Barrister Emeka Obi." The lawyer smiled professionally. "I handle many property transactions." Amara politely shook his hand. Their conversation lasted only a few minutes. Nothing illegal was discussed, nothing improper. Yet, before leaving, Barrister Emeka handed her his business card. "If you ever need legal advice concerning family property, don't hesitate to call." She slipped the card into her handbag. As she drove home, she told herself she was only gathering information, nothing more. Anyone in her position would do the same. But deep inside, something had already begun changing. The house was no longer simply where she lived. It had become something she believed she deserved to control. Meanwhile, Mama Ngozi remained completely unaware of the dangerous direction Amara's thoughts were taking. She continued treating her daughter-in-law with quiet respect. She still prayed for her every evening. She still believed patience could heal misunderstandings. She never imagined that kindness alone could not stop a heart slowly surrendering to greed. Nor did she realize that a single business card resting silently inside Amara's handbag would soon become the first step toward a plan capable of tearing their family apart. The first change came so quietly that Mama Ngozi almost convinced herself it was accidental. One Monday morning, she walked into the kitchen expecting to prepare breakfast before Ifeanyi left for another week-long assignment in Ibadan. Instead, she found the refrigerator locked with a small plastic latch. She frowned in confusion. The refrigerator had never been locked before. Just then, Amara entered the kitchen carrying a set of keys. "Oh," she said casually, "I forgot to tell you." Mama Ngozi smiled politely. "Tell me what?" "I've started keeping the refrigerator locked." "Is something wrong with it?" "No." Amara unlocked it, removed eggs, bread, and milk for breakfast, then locked it again before placing the keys into her pocket. "I've noticed food disappears too quickly." Mama Ngozi looked puzzled. "We're only 3 people." "Exactly." She turned toward the stove. "I simply want to manage expenses better." Mama Ngozi nodded slowly. "If that's what you think is best." She did not question the decision further. After breakfast, Ifeanyi left for work as usual. He hugged his wife. He embraced his mother. "Only 5 days this time," he promised. Mama Ngozi smiled warmly. "We'll be waiting." She watched until his vehicle disappeared beyond the gate. As always, silence followed. Amara returned to the kitchen. From the refrigerator, she removed a small plastic container. Inside were 2 slices of bread and a single boiled egg. She placed them on the table. "This will be enough for your lunch." Mama Ngozi blinked. "What about dinner? You'll have leftovers from yesterday." "There aren't many left." "You don't eat much anyway." Her tone was calm, matter-of-fact, as though discussing the weather. Mama Ngozi quietly accepted the plate. "Thank you." She could have argued. Instead, she remembered all the years when families across Nigeria struggled to afford even 1 meal each day. Complaining about food felt wrong. She thanked God before eating. Over the following week, similar changes appeared. Portions became smaller. Meals became simpler. Whenever Ifeanyi was home, the dining table overflowed with delicious dishes: rice, chicken, fresh fish, vegetables, fruit. The moment he left town, everything changed. Mama Ngozi noticed the pattern, but remained silent. She assumed perhaps money had become tighter than she realized. One afternoon, she grew dizzy while hanging laundry outside. The sunlight blurred before her eyes. She quickly sat beneath the mango tree until the feeling passed. Mama Chinyere happened to see her through the fence. "Mama Ngozi!" The older woman hurried over. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Mama Ngozi forced a smile. "I stood up too quickly." Mama Chinyere looked unconvinced. "You've lost weight." "It's just old age." "Have you seen a doctor recently?" "There is no need." Before the conversation could continue, Amara stepped outside. "Mama." "Yes." "The sitting room hasn't been dusted." Mama Ngozi slowly stood. "I'll do it now." Mama Chinyere watched her neighbor walk away. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. That evening, she mentioned the incident to her husband. "I don't think Mama Ngozi is well." Her husband shrugged. "Perhaps she's getting older." "No." Mama Chinyere shook her head. I've known that woman for nearly 20 years. Then what do you think? I don't know. But something has changed. Meanwhile, inside the Okonkwo house, Mama Ngozi quietly swallowed 2 pain tablets with a glass of water. The arthritis in her knees had worsened considerably. Normally, she visited a nearby clinic every month for medication. This month, she had missed her appointment, not because she forgot, because Amara kept postponing it. We'll go next week. Then, the clinic will still be there. Then, let's wait until Ifeanyi comes home. Another week passed. The medicine bottle gradually emptied. Only 3 tablets remained. One evening, Mama Ngozi approached Amara carefully. My medication is almost finished. Amara barely looked up from her laptop. I know. Could we visit the clinic tomorrow? I'm busy. It will only take an hour. We'll go later. My knees are becoming painful. Amara sighed dramatically. Mama, everything doesn't have to happen immediately. Mama Ngozi lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. She quietly walked back to her room. That night, she cut 1 tablet in half to make the medicine last longer. When Ifeanyi called the following evening, his voice sounded cheerful. How's everyone? We're doing well, Amara answered brightly. And Mama? Mama Ngozi took the phone. I'm here, my son. How are your knees? She glanced briefly toward Amara. They're much better. Good. If anything worries you, promise you'll tell me. I promise. The lie caught in her throat. After ending the call, she sat quietly on the edge of her bed. For several minutes she stared at the phone. She had almost told him. The words had reached her lips. But then she imagined him abandoning an important project, driving home in panic, confronting his wife, watching his marriage collapse before his eyes. She could not bear the thought. I can endure a little longer, she whispered to herself. It will get better. The following weekend, Ifeanyi returned unexpectedly for only 1 night before leaving again. He immediately noticed something. Mama. Yes. Have you lost weight? She laughed gently. You're imagining things. No. He looked carefully at her face. You look tired. Amara answered before Mama Ngozi could speak. She refuses to rest. I keep telling her to stop doing housework. Mama Ngozi looked at Amara in surprise. Amara smiled warmly. She insists on cleaning everything herself. Ifeanyi sighed. Mama, please listen to her. I will. I mean it. I know. He hugged his mother. She hugged him tightly. Longer than usual. For one brief moment, Ifeanyi sensed something unusual. Her embrace felt desperate, almost fearful. When he gently pulled away, she was smiling again. Whatever he had sensed vanished. The next morning, he left before sunrise. As soon as his car disappeared, Amara handed Mama Ngozi a broom. The backyard. Mama Ngozi accepted it silently. Halfway through, sweeping sharp pain shot through her knee. She stumbled. The broom fell. She caught herself against the wall before collapsing. For nearly a minute, she remained there breathing heavily. Amara watched from the doorway. Instead of helping, she folded her arms. You'll finish before noon. Mama Ngozi nodded weakly. Yes. She picked up the broom. Each movement became slower than the last. From behind the fence, unseen by either woman, Mama Chinyere had arrived home carrying groceries. She froze. She watched the elderly woman struggle to stand, while Amara simply observed. It lasted only a few seconds. Then Amara turned and walked back inside. Mama Chinyere remained standing in silence. A strange feeling settled in her heart. She still lacked proof. She still hoped she was misunderstanding what she had seen. But for the first time, she stopped believing the changes inside the Okonkwo home were merely the result of old age. Something far darker was unfolding behind those walls. And although Mama Ngozi continued protecting her son's happiness with unwavering silence, someone else had quietly begun noticing the cracks she could no longer hide. Mama Chinyere Eze had lived on the same street for more than 25 years. She had watched children grow into adults, witnessed marriages begin, and attended more funerals than she cared to remember. Experience had taught her one important lesson: when a person's smile slowly disappeared, there was always a reason. During the past few months, she had watched that change happen to Mama Ngozi. The cheerful widow who once greeted everyone with laughter now hurried back inside whenever she finished sweeping the compound. The woman who used to spend Sunday afternoons chatting beneath the mango tree rarely stayed outside for more than a few minutes. Something was wrong. The question was whether anyone else could see it. One Wednesday morning, Mama Chinyere deliberately carried a basket of fresh oranges to the Okonkwo house. She knocked gently. Mama Ngozi answered almost immediately. Her face brightened. "Chinyere, please come in. I brought these from my cousin's farm." "Oh, you're always too kind." Mama Ngozi reached for the basket, but Mama Chinyere noticed her hands trembling. "Are you feeling cold?" "No." "You seem to be shaking." Mama Ngozi quickly clasped her hands together. "It's only my arthritis." They entered the sitting room together. For the first time in weeks, Mama Ngozi relaxed enough to smile naturally. The two elderly women spoke about church activities, grandchildren in the neighborhood, and rising food prices. Nothing unusual, nothing personal. Then Mama Chinyere quietly asked, "How are you really?" The room became silent. Mama Ngozi lowered her eyes. "I'm fine." "No." Mama Chinyere smiled gently. "You've known me too long to answer like that." Mama Ngozi tried changing the subject. "The oranges smell wonderful." "Mama," her voice softened, "you've lost weight. I'm getting older. You avoid everyone now." "I'm simply busy." "You never look anyone in the eye anymore." Mama Ngozi remained silent. Mama Chinyere reached across the table and took her friend's hand. "If someone has hurt you, you don't have to carry it alone." For one brief second, tears gathered in Mama Ngozi's eyes. She almost spoke. Almost. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway. Amara entered carrying her handbag. "Oh, Mama Chinyere." She smiled politely. "Oh, what a pleasant surprise." "We were just talking." "I'm glad." Amara placed her bag on the chair. "Mama Ngozi has been keeping herself busy." Mama Chinyere nodded slowly. "I can see that. She refuses to slow down." Mama Ngozi quietly looked at the floor. Amara continued smiling. "I keep telling her she's no longer young." The conversation shifted immediately. Within minutes, Mama Chinyere excused herself. As she walked toward the gate, she looked back once. Mama Ngozi was standing in the doorway. Their eyes met. The older woman managed the smallest shake of her head. It was almost invisible. Yet Mama Chinyere understood. She was asking for silence. That frightened her more than any confession could have. After returning home, she could not stop thinking about it. Something serious was happening. But what? And why would Mama Ngozi refuse help? That evening she mentioned everything to her daughter Adaeze, who had come to visit. "Perhaps she's protecting someone." "Protecting who?" Adaeze asked. "My guess." Mama Chinyere hesitated. "Her son." Adaeze frowned. "Why would she protect him?" "Not him. The marriage." Adaeze slowly nodded. "I've seen women do that." "So have I. They believe silence keeps families together." Mama Chinyere sighed deeply. "But silence sometimes protects the wrong person." Meanwhile, across the fence, another conversation unfolded. Amara stood in the kitchen sorting through household bills. She looked toward Mama Ngozi. "I don't want neighbors visiting so often. They're only being friendly." They ask too many questions. They've known us for years. Exactly. Amara looked directly at her. They notice everything. Mama Ngozi answered softly. They only worry because they care. I don't need their concern. They weren't discussing you. Amara closed the folder sharply. I decide what happens in this house. The words lingered in the air. Mama Ngozi quietly returned to washing vegetables. She no longer argued. She had discovered that every disagreement only created more tension. Later that week, Ifeanyi called during the lunch. His voice sounded exhausted. We've had delays because of the rain. I'm sorry, Mama Ngozi replied, but the project should finish ahead of schedule. That's wonderful. I might even come home earlier next month. Mama Ngozi smiled. That will make everyone happy. After ending the call, she remained seated beside the window. Earlier. The word echoed inside her heart. Perhaps things would improve once Ifeanyi spent more time at home. Perhaps Amara simply struggled with loneliness whenever her husband traveled. Perhaps everything could still return to normal. Hope had become her way of surviving. The following Sunday, church members gathered after the morning service for refreshments. Mama Ngozi almost decided not to attend, but Ifeanyi had insisted before leaving. You've missed too many Sundays. So she went. Many people greeted her warmly, yet nearly everyone asked the same question. Are you feeling all right? You seem tired. Have you been sleeping? She answered each one politely. I'm perfectly fine. Only Mama Chinyere noticed the rehearsed smile. After church ended, she walked beside Mama Ngozi toward the parking area. You don't have to tell me today. Mama Ngozi looked at her quietly. But when you're ready. She gently squeezed her hand. I'll listen. Tears threatened to return. Instead, Mama Ngozi smiled. Thank you. It was all she could say. When she returned home, Amara was waiting. You stayed longer than necessary. People wanted to greet me. You enjoy making everyone think you're lonely. I never said that. You don't have to. Amara stepped closer. I know exactly what you're doing. Mama Ngozi looked confused. I'm doing nothing. Good. Amara's voice became firmer. Keep it that way. That night, Mama Ngozi knelt beside her bed. Her knees protested painfully against the hard floor. She prayed for her son. She prayed for Amara. Then, for the first time, she prayed for courage. Not courage to confront anyone, simply courage to endure another day. Across the street, Mama Chinyere stood by her bedroom window, looking toward the Okonkwo house. Only one light remained on. She could not explain why, but a heavy feeling settled over her heart. She sensed that whatever was happening inside that home was growing worse. And if no one stepped in, soon, the quiet suffering she had glimpsed over the past weeks would become something far more difficult to stop. Without realizing it, she had already become the first person outside the family to see the truth hiding beneath the appearance of a perfect home. She still lacked proof, but she had stopped believing in coincidence. Every instinct she had developed over a lifetime told her that Mama Ngozi was silently carrying a burden far too heavy for one elderly woman to bear alone. September arrived with cooler evenings, but the tension inside the Okonkwo home continued to grow. For the first time in months, Ifeanyi received 3 consecutive days off after successfully completing an important phase of the government construction project. His supervisor insisted that the team take a short break before beginning the next stage. You've earned it, his supervisor said with a smile. Ifeanyi welcomed the opportunity. He imagined surprising his family with an early return, spending time with his mother, and finally taking Amara out to dinner as he had promised weeks earlier. On his drive back to Lagos, he stopped at a roadside market and bought fresh fruits for Mama Ngozi. He also picked up a beautiful blue wrapper she had admired months earlier, but refused to let him buy because she considered it too expensive. For Amara, he purchased a gold bracelet engraved with the words, "Forever Together." As he carried the shopping bags into the house, Amara hurried toward him with an excited smile. "You're home. I wanted to surprise both of you." She embraced him warmly. "You should have called. I wanted to see your faces." Mama Ngozi slowly walked from the kitchen. The moment she saw her son standing in the doorway, genuine happiness lit up her face. "My son." She hugged him tightly. Ifeanyi immediately noticed how light she felt in his arms. He stepped back and looked carefully at her. "Mama." She smiled. "What is it? Have you been eating properly?" She laughed softly. "Of course. You've become thinner. It's just old age." Amara joined the conversation before he could ask more questions. "Mama has been insisting on doing all the housework. I keep telling her to rest." Ifeanyi sighed. "Mama, you promised me." "I know. I don't want you overworking yourself." She nodded gently. "I'll be more careful." Although the explanation sounded reasonable, something continued bothering him. It wasn't only her weight. Her eyes looked unusually tired. Her smile appeared slower. Even her voice seemed weaker than he remembered. That afternoon, while Amara prepared lunch, Ifeanyi carried the bags into his mother's room. "I brought you something." He unfolded the blue wrapper. Mama Ngozi gasped. "It is beautiful. I remembered you liked it." She gently touched the fabric. "You shouldn't spend so much money. I can never repay everything you've done for me." Tears filled her eyes. "My greatest reward is seeing you happy." He smiled. "Then you've succeeded." As he placed the wrapper inside her wardrobe, something caught his attention. The medicine bottle on the shelf, almost empty. He picked it up. "Mama." "Yes. Weren't you supposed to refill this weeks ago?" She hesitated. "I still had enough." He frowned. "No." He checked the label. "This prescription expired last month. I've been taking fewer tablets." "Why?" "I've been feeling better." Something about the answer felt wrong. His mother had never lied convincingly. He looked directly into her eyes. "Are your knees hurting again?" She forced another smile. "Nothing serious. I'll take you to the clinic tomorrow." Before she could answer, Amara called from the dining room. "Lunch is ready." The conversation ended. During lunch, Ifeanyi quietly observed both women. Everything appeared normal. Amara served Mama Ngozi first. She asked whether the soup needed more seasoning. She even reminded her to eat more meat. Anyone watching would have admired her kindness. Still, something felt rehearsed. That evening, they sat together watching television. Mama Ngozi excused herself earlier than usual. "I'm feeling sleepy." After she disappeared into her room, Ifeanyi looked toward Amara. "Has Mama been all right? She's getting older." "I know, but she seems different." Amara shrugged. "She's probably lonely whenever you travel." The explanation sounded reasonable, perhaps even logical, yet his uneasiness remained. The following morning, Ifeanyi woke earlier than everyone else. He decided to prepare breakfast himself as a surprise. As he entered the kitchen, he noticed something strange. The refrigerator was locked. He stared at it for several seconds. Why would anyone lock a refrigerator inside their own home? Just then, Amara entered. She looked briefly surprised. "You're awake already?" He pointed toward the refrigerator. "When did we start locking it?" She laughed lightly. "Oh, I've been trying to organize groceries better." "Organize?" "I noticed food was spoiling." "So you lock it?" She smiled naturally. "It helps me plan meals." He accepted the explanation, although it sounded unusual. Later that morning, he accompanied Mama Ngozi into the garden. She slowly watered the flowers while he trimmed several bushes. For the first time in months, they were alone. He glanced toward the house. Amara was inside talking on the phone. "Mama." She looked up. "Yes. Tell me honestly." She smiled gently. "What should I tell you?" "Are you happy?" The question lingered between them. She looked away toward the hibiscus flowers. "My happiness comes from seeing you well. That's not what I asked." Silence. He placed the gardening scissors on the ground. "Mama." She still avoided his eyes. "If something is wrong." Her hands tightened around the watering can. "I need to know." For several seconds, she almost spoke. The words pressed against her heart. This was her chance. One sentence, one honest confession. Everything could change. She slowly lifted her head. "Ifeanyi." Hope appeared on his face. "Yes." She looked toward the kitchen window. Amara stood there watching them. Their eyes met. Almost instantly, Mama Ngozi understood the warning hidden inside her daughter-in-law's expression. She lowered her gaze again. "You work too hard." Ifeanyi blinked. "What?" "You need more rest." He looked disappointed. "I thought." She forced a smile. "I only worry about you." He nodded slowly. "I'm all right. But promise me you'll slow down." "I promise." The conversation ended. As they walked back inside, Ifeanyi felt frustrated without understanding why. His instincts told him his mother wanted to say something completely different. Yet he had no evidence, no explanation, nothing except a feeling. That afternoon, he received an urgent phone call from his supervisor. Unexpected structural problems had been discovered at the project site. He would need to return immediately. "I leave in an hour," he told Amara. She appeared disappointed. "So soon?" "I'm afraid so." Mama Ngozi quietly helped him pack. Before leaving, he hugged her once more. "I'll come back as soon as I can. I'll be waiting. And remember," he smiled gently, "tomorrow we'll schedule that clinic appointment." She nodded. "Of course." As his vehicle disappeared down the street, once again, Mama Ngozi remained standing at the gate. She watched until it vanished completely. Behind her, Amara slowly closed the front door. The warm smile she had worn throughout Ifeanyi's visit disappeared almost instantly. For Mama Ngozi, the brief 3 days of peace were over. For Ifeanyi, the uncomfortable feeling he carried back to the construction site refused to leave his mind. He still could not explain it. But for the first time since his marriage began, he started wondering whether there were things happening inside his own home that he had somehow failed to see. The morning after Ifeanyi returned to the construction site, the Okonkwo house fell back into its familiar silence. Mama Ngozi folded the blue wrapper her son had given her and carefully placed it inside the wardrobe. She ran her fingers across the fabric for a long moment before closing the door. Whenever Ifeanyi was home, the house felt warm again. Whenever he left, that warmth seemed to disappear with him. She sighed quietly and headed toward the kitchen. Amara was already seated at the dining table, scrolling through messages on her phone while sipping coffee. Without looking up, she spoke. "We need to talk." Mama Ngozi stopped beside the table. "Of course." Amara finally raised her eyes. "I've been thinking about the future." "The future?" "Yes." She folded her hands together. "This neighborhood is changing." Mama Ngozi nodded. "There are many new buildings." "Exactly." "Your son mentioned that." Amara leaned back in her chair. "Developers keep offering ridiculous amounts of money for this property." Mama Ngozi remained calm. "I know." "Have you thought about accepting?" "No." The answer came gently, but without hesitation. Amara smiled, though the smile did not reach her eyes. You answered very quickly. I don't need time to think. Why not? Mama Ngozi sat down across from her. This house is my husband's memory. It can still remain a memory after you sell it. It is more than walls. Amara's expression hardened slightly. Everything has a price. Mama Ngozi shook her head. No. Everyone says that until the offer becomes large enough. My answer is still no. Silence settled over the room. Neither woman raised her voice. Yet the conversation felt heavier with every passing second. Finally, Amara stood. We'll discuss it another time. I don't think there's anything to discuss. Amara walked away without replying. Later that afternoon, she drove into the city and parked outside a modern office building. She looked once at the business card that had remained inside her handbag for weeks. Barrister Emeka Obi. She took a slow breath before entering. The receptionist welcomed her politely and asked her to wait. A few minutes later, Barrister Emeka appeared, wearing an expensive charcoal suit. Mrs. Okonkwo, thank you for seeing me. My pleasure. They entered his office. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Amara explained the situation carefully. The family home belongs to my mother-in-law. I see. My husband assumes everything is already settled. Barrister Emeka nodded thoughtfully. And what exactly are you hoping to accomplish? I want ownership transferred. Voluntarily. Of course. He remained silent for several moments. Has your mother-in-law expressed any willingness? Not yet. He folded his hands. Then convincing her will be your first challenge. Amara looked directly at him. And if persuasion doesn't work? The lawyer did not answer immediately. Instead, he chose his words carefully. Family property disputes can become complicated. I understand. There are perfectly legal transfer procedures. I know. But they require genuine consent. Amara lowered her voice. People change their minds. They sometimes do. And documents can be prepared in advance. Barrister Emeka studied her face. He had spent years handling property disputes. He recognized ambition when he saw it. He also recognized impatience. I can prepare paperwork whenever your family is ready. He deliberately emphasized the last sentence. When your family is ready. Amara nodded. I'll contact you. As she left the office, Barrister Emeka remained seated behind his desk. Something about the meeting unsettled him. Nothing illegal had been requested. Not directly. Still, he sensed this case might eventually become troublesome. Back at home, Mama Ngozi spent the afternoon repairing one of Ifeanyi's old shirts. She preferred mending clothes instead of replacing them. Her late husband had always believed that taking care of possessions was another way of showing gratitude. As she threaded a needle, someone knocked gently at the gate. It was Mama Chinyere. I made bean cakes. She smiled warmly. I brought you some. Mama Ngozi welcomed her inside. The two women sat beneath the mango tree while enjoying tea. For a while they spoke about ordinary things, church announcements, children playing in the street, the unusually hot weather. Eventually, Mama Chinyere became serious. Mama, yes, I've been worried about you. There is no need. There is every reason. Mama Ngozi looked away. You've become quieter. I've simply grown older. No. Mama Chinyere gently placed her hand over her friend's. Old age doesn't make someone's spirit disappear. The words pierced Mama Ngozi's heart. For several long seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Mama Chinyere asked softly, Are you afraid? Mama Ngozi's breathing slowed. She wanted to deny it. Instead, tears quietly filled her eyes. I don't want my son to suffer. Mama Chinyere squeezed her hand. What does that mean? Mama Ngozi quickly wiped away the tears. I shouldn't have said anything. You can trust me. I know. Then tell me. Mama Ngozi shook her head. I can't. Before Mama Chinyere could continue, the sound of a car entering the driveway interrupted them. Amara had returned. The moment she stepped out of the vehicle and noticed the two elderly women together, her expression tightened. She approached with a polite smile. Mama Chinyere. Good afternoon. I hope we're not keeping Mama Ngozi from her work. We were only talking. I'm sure. Amara looked toward her mother-in-law. The laundry still needs folding. I'll do it now. Mama Chinyere watched carefully. She noticed how quickly Mama Ngozi stood, how quickly she apologized, how quickly she obeyed. The behavior no longer resembled simple respect. It resembled fear. That realization settled heavily inside her. After leaving the house, Mama Chinyere did something she had never considered before. She wrote down the date in a small notebook she kept at home. Beneath it, she recorded a simple sentence. Mama Ngozi cried today but refused to explain why. She did not know whether the note would ever matter. Something inside her simply insisted she should remember. Meanwhile, inside the Okonkwo house, Amara closed the bedroom door behind her. She removed a folder from her handbag. Inside were draft property transfer forms Barrister Emeka had prepared for review. She placed them on the bed and stared at the signature line. Only one signature remained missing. Mama Ngozi's. Amara slowly picked up a pen and tapped it against the paper. Her patience had lasted long enough. Gentle persuasion had failed. Polite conversations had changed nothing. As she looked at the blank signature line, a new decision quietly formed in her mind. If kindness could not persuade Mama Ngozi to surrender the house, then pressure might. And once that decision settled in her heart, the distance between manipulation and cruelty became far smaller than she was willing to admit. The following Monday began with an unusual stillness. Even the birds that usually gathered in the mango tree seemed quieter than usual. Mama Ngozi woke before sunrise, said her morning prayers, and quietly prepared breakfast. She hoped that beginning the day peacefully might somehow soften the growing tension inside the house. Hope had become a habit. Disappointment had become another. Amara entered the kitchen shortly after 7. She was dressed neatly, her makeup flawless, as though she were preparing for an important meeting rather than spending the day at home. She poured herself a cup of coffee without speaking. Mama Ngozi greeted her softly. Good morning. Morning. Neither woman said anything else while breakfast cooked. The silence felt heavier than words. After eating, Amara carried her cup into the living room. Mama. Yes. Come and sit. Mama Ngozi dried her hands and joined her. Amara placed a brown folder on the coffee table. I want us to finish something today. Mama Ngozi looked at the folder. What is it? Property documents. Her heartbeat slowed. I thought we already discussed that. We discussed it. Amara gently pushed the folder toward her. Today, we're going to solve it. Mama Ngozi did not touch it. There is nothing to solve. There is. The house isn't being sold. I didn't mention selling. Mama Ngozi remained silent. I simply want ownership transferred. No. The answer came quietly, firmly, without anger. Amara inhaled slowly. You haven't even looked. I don't need to. You should at least read them. My decision won't change. The room fell silent again. Amara leaned back in her chair. You know I've been thinking. About what? About how unfair this situation is. Mama Ngozi listened quietly. I've spent years caring for this house. You have. I've renovated it. Yes. I've welcomed guests. That's true. I've supported your son. You have. And yet, legally, she tapped the folder. I own nothing. Mama Ngozi folded her hands in her lap. This house was never about ownership. It is now. No. It has always been about family. Amara smiled faintly. Family should trust one another. We should. Then trust me. I want to. Then sign. Mama Ngozi slowly shook her head. I cannot. Amara's patience visibly thinned. Why? Because your father-in-law asked me to protect this home. He has been gone for years. My promise has not. You value a promise to the dead more than the wishes of the living. I value both. Clearly not. Mama Ngozi looked directly at her. I trust Ifeanyi. Then why not transfer everything now? Because one day the decision should belong to all generations of this family. Amara's expression hardened. There are no other generations living here. There will be, perhaps. Mama Ngozi smiled gently. And this home should still be here when they arrive. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Amara closed the folder with more force than necessary. You make everything difficult. I never wanted conflict. But you're creating it. I am protecting what was entrusted to me. Amara stood. I've tried asking respectfully. I know. You've left me no choice. Mama Ngozi frowned. What does that mean? It means things cannot continue like this. Before Mama Ngozi could respond, the doorbell rang. Amara looked toward the entrance. They're here. Without answering, Amara walked to the front door. A few moments later, she returned accompanied by Barrister Emeka Obi. The lawyer greeted Mama Ngozi politely. Good morning, Ma. Mama Ngozi recognized him immediately from church fundraising events years earlier. Good morning. I hope I'm not interrupting. She looked toward Amara. I wasn't expecting visitors. Amara smiled calmly. I invited him. Barrister Emeka sat across from Mama Ngozi and carefully placed his briefcase on the table. I understand there have been discussions regarding family property. Mama Ngozi remained composed. There have. My role today is only to explain legal procedures. I appreciate that. He removed several documents. If property owners wish to transfer ownership to immediate family members, these are the standard forms. Mama Ngozi did not reach for them. I have no intention of transferring ownership. Barrister Emeka glanced briefly toward Amara before returning his attention to Mama Ngozi. I understand. Then there is nothing else to discuss, Amara interrupted. Mama. No. You haven't even listened. I've listened. You haven't considered what this means for our future. My answer remains the same. The lawyer spoke carefully. No one can force you to sign. Mama Ngozi nodded. I know. But sometimes families benefit from discussing long-term planning. I've already planned. What have you planned? I will protect this home until God tells me otherwise. The room became quiet once more. Barrister Emeka slowly closed the documents. He had expected resistance. He had not expected such peaceful certainty. He stood. I don't believe today's meeting should continue. Amara looked surprised. What? He lowered his voice. Mrs. Okonkwo, your mother-in-law, has clearly expressed her decision. But there is nothing further I can advise today. He gathered his papers. After offering Mama Ngozi a respectful nod, he walked toward the door. Outside, before entering his car, Amara hurried after him. You can't simply leave. I can. We're close. No. He looked directly at her. You're very far. I only need her signature. You need her willing signature. Amara crossed her arms. People change. They do. But pressure rarely creates valid consent. He opened his car door. My advice is simple. What? Do not continue down a path you'll regret. Without waiting for an answer, he drove away. Amara remained standing in the driveway, watching the car disappear. Inside the house, Mama Ngozi quietly returned the untouched documents to the coffee table. She whispered a short prayer of gratitude. For a brief moment, she believed the worst had passed. She was wrong. That evening, Ifeanyi called from Ibadan. His voice carried exciting news. The ministry approved the final inspection. That's wonderful, Mama Ngozi replied. I may finish earlier than expected. When? If everything goes well, perhaps in 2 or 3 days. Mama Ngozi's heart lifted. So soon. I want to surprise both of you. She smiled despite herself. We'll be happy to see you. After the call ended, Amara stood silently in the hallway. She had heard every word. 2 or 3 days. Not enough time. Everything she had planned was slipping away. She walked slowly into the bedroom and opened the drawer containing the property documents. For several moments, she stared at the blank signature line. Then she closed the folder and looked toward the window where Mama Ngozi was watering flowers beneath the fading evening light. Her face became cold. If persuasion had failed, if legal explanations had failed, if patience had failed, then she would stop asking. Before Ifeanyi returned home, Mama Ngozi would make a choice. Either she would sign the documents voluntarily, or she would leave the house she had spent a lifetime protecting. Amara no longer intended to offer a third option. The next morning arrived with an uneasy silence that seemed to settle over the Okonkwo house before dawn. Mama Ngozi finished her prayers and opened the front door to sweep the compound just as she had done every morning for decades. The familiar rhythm of the broom against the concrete usually brought her peace. Today, it did not. She could still hear Amara's final words from the previous evening. Either sign or leave. The threat had not been shouted. It had been spoken quietly. Somehow, that made it even more frightening. When she finished sweeping, she carried the broom back inside. Amara was already waiting in the sitting room. The brown folder rested neatly on the coffee table once again. You've had the whole night to think, Amara said, calmly. Mama Ngozi remained standing. I've already made my decision. I was hoping you'd reconsider. I cannot. Amara slowly crossed one leg over the other. You know, I truly tried to handle this peacefully. I know. I spoke respectfully. You did. I asked politely. You did. And you refused every time. Mama Ngozi looked at her with gentle eyes. My answer isn't meant to hurt you. It already has. Silence filled the room. Finally, Amara stood and walked toward the window. Ifeanyi is almost finished with his project. Yes. He'll come home believing everything is perfect. Mama Ngozi said nothing. I wonder how disappointed he'll be if he discovers you've chosen to divide this family. The words struck deeply. I have never wanted division. Really? Amara turned around. Then why won't you help secure our future? This house already has a future. No, it has uncertainty. Mama Ngozi folded her hands together. The future cannot be built on fear. Amara's expression hardened. It can be built on ownership. Before Mama Ngozi could answer, Amara picked up the folder and placed it directly into her hands. Read it. I don't need to. Read it anyway. Mama Ngozi looked down at the papers. Property transfer forms, signature lines, witness spaces. Everything appeared official. Everything appeared final. She quietly closed the folder without reading another page. I won't sign. Amara's patience finally disappeared. You are being selfish. Mama Ngozi lifted her eyes. I've sacrificed everything for this family. And now you're refusing one simple request. This isn't simple. It is. No. It is the home your husband left in my care. And now your son is asking for it. Mama Ngozi shook her head. My son has never asked. The sentence hung heavily in the air. For several seconds, Amara had no reply. She knew it was true. Every conversation about transferring ownership had come from her. Never from Ifeanyi. That truth only made her angrier. Without another word, she snatched the folder from Mama Ngozi's hands. Fine. She marched toward the hallway. If kindness doesn't work, perhaps consequences will. Mama Ngozi quietly closed her eyes. She whispered another prayer, not for herself, for the family. Around noon, Mama Ngozi discovered that the lock on her bedroom door had been changed. She stared at it in confusion. She tried her key. It no longer fit. Amara appeared behind her. I moved your things. My things. You'll be staying in the storage room. Mama Ngozi blinked. The storage room? You don't need such a large bedroom. My husband and I shared that room for 40 years. And now circumstances have changed. Mama Ngozi looked toward the closed door. My photographs, they're packed. My Bible, it's in the other room. My husband's belongings, they're safe. Every sentence was delivered with cold efficiency. No shouting, no insults. Simply decisions made without permission. Mama Ngozi slowly walked toward the small storage room at the back of the house. Inside stood a narrow bed, several cardboard boxes, and a single small window. She placed her Bible carefully beside the pillow. Then she sat quietly. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt like a visitor inside her own home. That afternoon, Mama Chinyere noticed movement through the open back window. She saw Mama Ngozi arranging blankets inside the storage room. Confused, she walked to the fence. Mama Ngozi looked up. Oh, Chinyere, why are you in there? Before Mama Ngozi could answer, Amara stepped into the backyard. Mama Chinyere. Yes. We're reorganizing the bedrooms. Mama Chinyere frowned. Reorganizing. Mama Ngozi wanted a quieter room. The explanation sounded unnatural. Mama Ngozi lowered her eyes. She did not confirm it. She did not deny it. Mama Chinyere recognized that silence. It troubled her deeply. I see, she said carefully. I'll visit another day. As she walked home, her concern became certainty. Something terrible was happening. She simply did not know how to help without making matters worse. Late that evening, Ifeanyi called again. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Mama Ngozi smiled despite the ache in her heart. Thank God. If traffic isn't terrible, I'll be home before lunch. We'll be waiting. I've missed both of you. So have we. After ending the call, Mama Ngozi held the phone tightly. Tomorrow. Her son would finally come home. She prayed she could endure one more night. Across the hallway, Amara was making preparations of her own. She removed the property documents from the drawer once more. Then she dialed Barrister Emeka. The lawyer answered after several rings. Good evening. Barrister, I need to speak with you. I'm afraid I cannot assist further. You haven't even heard my question. I believe I already understand. You don't. He sighed quietly. Mrs. Okonkwo, your mother-in-law, has clearly refused. I only need one final meeting. My answer is no. I can pay your fee. This is not about money. He paused before continuing. My advice remains unchanged. Respect her decision. The line went silent. Then he ended the call. Amara stared at the phone in disbelief. She had expected cooperation. Instead, she found herself alone. For a brief moment, she considered abandoning the entire plan. The thought disappeared almost immediately. She convinced herself that everyone else simply lacked the courage to do what needed to be done. The following morning arrived bright and hot. By 9 o'clock, the sun hung high above the compound. Amara carried a wooden chair into the middle of the courtyard. She placed the brown folder on its seat. Then she walked toward the storage room. Mama Ngozi looked up from her prayers. Yes. Come outside. What for? We're going to settle this today. Mama Ngozi followed slowly. When she reached the courtyard, she saw the folder waiting on the chair. Amara pointed toward the open space beneath the blazing sun. You will stay here until you decide. Mama Ngozi looked quietly at her. I've already decided. Then perhaps the heat will help you reconsider. The elderly woman closed her eyes for a moment. Then, without another word, she slowly lowered herself onto her knees. Not because she accepted defeat, but because she refused to surrender the promise she had made to her late husband. Neither woman noticed the distant sound of a vehicle turning onto their street. The afternoon sun hung mercilessly over the compound. Heat shimmered above the concrete as Mama Ngozi remained on her knees. Her breathing had become slow and measured, but her back stayed straight. The brown folder rested on the wooden chair in front of her. The signature line remained blank. Amara stood a few steps away with her arms folded. You've had enough time. Mama Ngozi lifted her eyes. My answer has not changed. You are exhausting yourself for nothing. I am keeping a promise. You are protecting a piece of paper. I am protecting my husband's wishes. Amara exhaled sharply. No, you're protecting your pride. Mama Ngozi gently shook her head. If this were pride, I would have argued with you months ago. The words caught Amara by surprise. I chose peace. You chose stubbornness. I chose silence. And silence ends today. She opened the folder and removed the documents. I'll ask you one final time. Mama Ngozi looked at the papers. Then she slowly looked away. I will not sign. For a brief moment, neither woman moved. The only sounds came from distant traffic beyond the estate and the rustling leaves of the mango tree. Then, a familiar engine echoed from outside the gate. Amara froze. She had not expected anyone. Another vehicle stopped directly in front of the house. Mama Ngozi slowly lifted her head. Her heart skipped. The horn sounded once, softly, a habit only one person had, Ifeanyi. He had returned nearly 2 hours earlier than expected. Amara immediately forced a smile. Stand up! Mama Ngozi remained where she was. Please, hurry. Before either woman could move, the front gate opened. Ifeanyi stepped inside, carrying a travel bag over one shoulder. A small gift bag hung from his other hand. He had intended to surprise them. Instead, he stopped walking. The bag slipped from his hand and landed silently on the ground, his eyes fixed on the scene before him. His elderly mother, kneeling beneath the blazing afternoon sun, a folder of legal documents resting on a chair, Amara standing over her. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, Ifeanyi found his voice. Mama. Mama Ngozi slowly turned toward him. My son. He looked from her face to the papers, then back again. What is happening? Amara answered immediately. It's not what it looks like. He did not look at her. His eyes remained on his mother. Mama. She lowered her gaze. I asked. His voice trembled. What is happening? She opened her mouth. No words came. Amara stepped forward. She insisted on praying outside. Ifeanyi turned toward his wife for the first time. Praying. Yes. He looked again at the folder. With legal documents, Amara hesitated. I was discussing future planning. Future planning? His voice grew quieter. While my mother is on her knees, I never forced her. The sentence had barely left her lips when Ifeanyi noticed something else. His mother's hands. They were trembling violently. He hurried across the courtyard and knelt beside her. Mama. He gently touched her shoulder. Her skin felt hot, far too hot. How long have you been out here? She tried to smile. I'm all right. No. He looked into her tired eyes. You're not. He carefully helped her stand. The moment she rose, her legs gave way beneath her. Without thinking, he caught her before she fell. Mama! She leaned against him, dizzy from the heat. I only need to sit. His heart pounded. He guided her toward the shaded veranda. Only then did he notice how light she had become. She weighed far less than he remembered. He helped her into a chair before rushing inside for water. When he returned, Mama Ngozi accepted the glass with shaking hands. Ifeanyi remained crouched beside her. Did you eat today? She nodded faintly. A little. He looked toward Amara. What happened here? Amara took a slow breath. We were discussing property. I can see that. Your mother refuses to think about the future. My mother's future. Our future. He stared at her. What does that mean? The house. His expression slowly changed. The house. It should be transferred. Transferred. Into our names. Our names. She nodded. It only makes sense. Ifeanyi stood slowly. His face remained calm. Almost too calm. You've been asking her to transfer the property. I've only been trying to protect our family. My family. Our family. He glanced at the folder again, then back at his mother. Mama. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Did you want to sign? She answered immediately. No. He asked another question. Did anyone pressure you? Before she could speak, Amara interrupted. I simply explained the benefits. Ifeanyi raised one hand. I'm asking my mother. Silence returned. Mama Ngozi struggled to answer. She looked from her son to Amara. Fear lingered across her face. Ifeanyi noticed. He had never seen that expression before, not once in his entire life. He knelt beside her again. Mama. His voice softened. You don't have to protect anyone. Tears finally rolled down her cheeks. I never wanted your marriage to suffer. The words struck him like a blow. He stared at her in disbelief. My marriage? I thought. She wiped her eyes. If I stayed quiet. Her voice broke. Everyone would remain happy. Ifeanyi slowly closed his eyes. Months, perhaps longer. How much had happened while he was away? How much had he failed to see? He opened his eyes again. There was only one way to learn the truth. He stood and walked into the sitting room. His gaze swept across the house. Everything looked normal, beautiful, perfect. Then he noticed the hallway. My mother's bedroom. No answer came. He walked toward it. He tried the door. Locked. Confused, he looked around. Mama? She spoke softly from the veranda. I don't stay there anymore. He turned. What? I moved. Moved where? She hesitated. The storage room. For a moment, Ifeanyi thought he had misheard. The storage room. No one answered. He walked quickly toward the back of the house. He opened the small door. Inside stood the narrow bed. Cardboard boxes. A tiny window. His mother's Bible rested neatly beside the pillow. Nothing else needed explaining. He remained standing in the doorway for several long seconds. Behind him, Amara spoke quietly. I can explain. Ifeanyi did not turn around. He simply looked at the tiny room where his widowed mother had been sleeping. Then he spoke without raising his voice. No. His words were calm, painfully calm. I think, he slowly looked over his shoulder, I've finally seen enough. The words hung in the air long after Ifeanyi spoke them. I think, I've finally seen enough. No one answered. The afternoon that had begun with silence now felt unbearably heavy. Amara searched her husband's face, hoping to find uncertainty. Instead, she found something she had never seen before. Disappointment. Not the disappointment of a husband who had lost an argument. The disappointment of a son who had discovered that his own home no longer felt safe for his mother. Ifeanyi slowly walked back to the veranda. Mama Ngozi remained seated, both hands wrapped around the untouched glass of water. Her breathing had steadied, but the exhaustion on her face could not be hidden. He knelt beside her once more. Mama. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes. I'm sorry. The words startled him. Why are you apologizing? I should have told you sooner. He gently took her hands. No. I wanted to protect your marriage. His eyes closed briefly. You were trying to protect me. She nodded. I thought if I endured everything quietly, one day things would become peaceful again. His voice became almost a whisper. How long? Mama Ngozi hesitated. She did not want to answer. He asked again. How long have you been carrying this alone? She lowered her eyes. Since your travels became more frequent. His heart sank. Months. Not days. Not weeks. Months. He remembered every phone call, every time he had asked whether everything was all right, every cheerful answer, every reassuring smile. He had believed every word. I failed you. Mama Ngozi immediately shook her head. No, I should have known. You trusted your family. I should have looked more carefully. You were working. I left you alone. You were providing for us. Tears rolled down his face. His mother even now refused to blame him. That hurt more than any accusation could have. After several moments, he stood and turned toward Amara. His expression remained controlled. I want to understand. Amara quickly stepped forward. I can explain everything. Then explain. I never wanted to hurt Mama. He waited. I only wanted security. Security? Everything is becoming more expensive. I know. I worried about our future. So you asked her to transfer the house? Yes. He nodded slowly. Did I ever ask you to do that? She remained silent. I asked you a question. No. Did I ever tell you this house should belong to us? No. Did I ever complain that my mother still owned it? No. His voice remained calm. So, whose idea was it? Amara swallowed. It was mine. The admission echoed through the quiet compound. Ifeanyi looked toward the brown folder lying on the chair. You brought a lawyer here. I only wanted legal advice. He left without completing anything. She looked away. He said Mama refused. Yeah, because she did. Silence returned. Finally, Ifeanyi asked the question that had troubled him since entering the gate. Why was my mother on her knees? Amara hesitated. He waited patiently. I didn't force her. Mama. He turned toward his mother. Why were you kneeling? Mama Ngozi answered softly. She told me to remain there until I changed my mind. Amara immediately interrupted. I never touched her. No. Mama Ngozi spoke gently. You didn't. You chose to kneel. Because you said I would stay there until I signed. The truth settled over the courtyard. No shouting followed, no dramatic confrontation, only silence. Sometimes silence carried more weight than anger. Ifeanyi walked toward the wooden chair and picked up the folder. He opened it slowly. Property transfer forms, prepared, ready for signatures. He turned each page carefully. Then he closed the folder again. This ends today. Amara took a cautious step forward. Ifeanyi. He raised his hand gently. I'm not finished. She stopped speaking. My father built this house. He looked around the compound. I remember carrying blocks with him when I was still a boy. His voice softened. My mother sold her jewelry to buy roofing sheets. Mama Ngozi lowered her eyes. We had very little. I know. He smiled sadly. But I never felt poor. He turned back toward Amara. This house isn't valuable because developers want it. He placed his hand against the old veranda wall. It's valuable because every corner holds the sacrifices of the people who loved me. Amara's eyes filled with tears. I wasn't thinking that way. No, you weren't. I only wanted us to be safe. He nodded slowly. And in trying to secure tomorrow, his voice broke slightly. You took away my mother's peace today. The sentence left Amara unable to respond. For the first time since everything had begun, she truly looked at Mama Ngozi, not as the obstacle standing between her and valuable property, but as an elderly widow, a woman who had raised the man she loved, a woman now sitting in visible exhaustion because of months of pressure. The realization came too late to erase what had happened. Her voice trembled. I'm sorry. Mama Ngozi looked at her quietly. There was no anger in her eyes, only sadness. I never stopped loving you as my daughter. Those words shattered the last of Amara's composure. She covered her face with both hands. I don't know how I became this person. No one answered immediately, because none of them truly knew. Greed rarely announced itself at the beginning. It arrived through small compromises, small justifications, small decisions that slowly became larger ones. Ifeanyi carefully gathered every property document into the folder. Without saying a word, he walked into the house. A few moments later, he returned carrying a small metal box. Mama Ngozi recognized it instantly. It had belonged to her late husband. Ifeanyi placed the folder inside the box. Then he handed the key to his mother. This belongs to you. She looked surprised. My son? No. He smiled gently through his tears. My father trusted you. He closed her fingers around the key. So do I. Fresh tears rolled down Mama Ngozi's cheeks, not tears of fear this time, tears of relief. The burden she had carried alone for so many months had finally been lifted. Across the courtyard, Mama Chinyere watched quietly through the half-open gate. She had seen Ifeanyi arrive earlier. She had waited outside praying she would not need to interfere. Now she saw the elderly mother, holding the small key in trembling hands. She smiled softly. Justice had not arrived through revenge. It had arrived through truth. And truth, once finally spoken, had proven stronger than months of silence. The healing of the Okonkwo family had only just begun, but for the first time in many months, Mama Ngozi no longer felt alone. Her son had finally seen what she had tried so desperately to hide, and he had chosen not property, not money, not appearances, but his mother. The house remained unusually quiet throughout the evening. No one had the appetite to eat the dinner that had been prepared earlier that afternoon. The aroma of jollof rice and grilled fish drifted through the kitchen untouched. For the first time since their marriage, Ifeanyi understood that silence could mean many different things. There was the silence his mother had carried to protect him. There was the silence Amara had used to hide the truth. And now there was the silence that follows painful honesty when everyone must decide what comes next. After helping Mama Ngozi into the sitting room to rest, Ifeanyi walked outside alone. The sky above Lagos had begun turning orange as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the neighboring rooftops. He sat beneath the old mango tree his father had planted decades earlier. As a boy, he had climbed its branches every weekend. His father had often said, "A tree survives storms because its roots stay strong." Only now did those words fully make sense. A few minutes later, he heard gentle footsteps behind him. Mama Ngozi slowly approached. "You shouldn't be outside," he said softly. "I wanted to sit with my son." He immediately stood and helped her onto the wooden bench beneath the tree. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mama Ngozi broke the silence. "You've been blaming yourself." He looked down. "I should have protected you." She gently placed her hand over his. "You did." "No. I arrived too late." "You arrived when God allowed you to." He shook his head. "I ignored too many signs." "You trusted your wife." "I should have trusted my instincts." Mama Ngozi smiled gently. "Trust is not a weakness. It feels like one today." "It isn't." She looked toward the house. The weakness was believing that silence alone could solve every problem. Those words surprised him. "You regret staying silent." She sighed deeply. "I regret believing I was protecting everyone." "You were trying to save my marriage." "Yes. And instead," her voice became quieter, "I almost lost my son." He turned toward her immediately. "You could never lose me." "I almost did." She smiled sadly. "You were slowly drifting away without realizing it." His work, his constant travel, his confidence that everything at home was fine. He suddenly saw how easily distance had created room for misunderstanding and hidden pain. "I promise you," he said quietly, "I will never allow work to blind me again." Mama Ngozi squeezed his hand. "I don't need promises." "What do you need?" "I need my family to heal." Inside the house, Amara remained alone in the bedroom. The wardrobe stood open. On the shelf lay the gold bracelet Ifeanyi had bought for her only days earlier. She picked it up carefully. The engraving caught the fading sunlight. "Forever together." Fresh tears filled her eyes. She remembered how excited she had been when he surprised her with the gift. She also remembered how only hours later she had forced his elderly mother to kneel in the courtyard. The contrast was unbearable. She slowly sat on the edge of the bed. For months, she had convinced herself that everything she did was for her family's future. She repeated the same excuse until she believed it completely. Now, sitting alone in the quiet room, she finally admitted another truth. Fear had become greed. Greed had become control. Control had become cruelty. No single decision had transformed her overnight. Instead, dozens of small compromises had carried her to a place she no longer recognized. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ifeanyi," his voice came from outside the door. "May I come in?" She wiped her face. "Yes." He entered quietly. Neither of them spoke immediately. He remained standing near the doorway. She remained seated. Finally, Amara broke the silence. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he answered honestly. "I don't know how to forgive this yet." She nodded. "I understand. I keep asking myself one question." She looked at him. "When did you stop seeing my mother as part of your family?" Amara closed her eyes. "I don't know. I wish I did." "So do I." "I loved her." "I know." "I respected her." "I know." He looked at the floor before continuing. And then something changed. She whispered, "I let money become more important than people." He did not argue, because it was true. After several moments, she stood. "I want to apologize." "To me." She shook her head. "To Mama." Together they walked into the sitting room. Mama Ngozi looked up from her Bible as they entered. Amara stopped several steps away. She did not attempt to defend herself. She did not offer excuses. She slowly lowered herself onto her knees. Mama Ngozi immediately looked distressed. My daughter! I don't deserve to call myself that. You do. No. Tears streamed freely down Amara's face. I humiliated you. I frightened you. I took away your room. I spoke to you without respect. Her voice trembled uncontrollably. And still, she looked up. You kept praying for me. Mama Ngozi's eyes filled with tears. How did you know? I heard you one night. Amara lowered her head again. You were praying for God to soften my heart. Silence settled over the room. I never stopped praying. I know. And I never stopped loving you. Those words finally broke the wall Amara had built around herself. She began crying openly. I am so sorry. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. Mama Ngozi slowly stood despite the pain in her knees. She walked toward Amara and gently placed both hands on her shoulders. Forgiveness is not pretending nothing happened. Amara looked up. It is choosing not to let hatred have the final word. The younger woman wept even harder. Mama Ngozi carefully helped her stand. Then, for the first time in many months, the two women embraced. It was not a perfect ending. Trust would not return in a single evening. Pain would not disappear overnight. But the first step toward healing had finally been taken. The following morning, Ifeanyi called a locksmith. Before noon, the lock on Mama Ngozi's old bedroom had been replaced. Together, he carried her Bible photographs, clothes, and her late husband's belongings back into the room she had shared with her husband for 4 decades. He carefully hung the blue wrapper inside the wardrobe. When everything was finished, Mama Ngozi looked around quietly. It feels like home again. Ifeanyi smiled. It always was. Later that afternoon, he also drove her to the clinic. The doctor examined her knees, renewed her medication, and assured them that with proper treatment and regular rest, her condition would improve. As they drove home, Mama Ngozi looked out the window at the busy streets of Lagos. For the first time in many months, the weight pressing against her heart felt lighter. Healing would require patience. Trust would require time. But truth had finally entered the house. And where truth was welcomed, hope could begin to grow again. 6 months passed. The dry season gave way to fresh rains, and with the changing weather came quiet but meaningful changes inside the Okonkwo home. The healing had not happened overnight. There had been uncomfortable conversations, long periods of reflection, moments when painful memories resurfaced without warning. Trust, Ifeanyi learned, was much like rebuilding a damaged house. The cracks could be repaired, but only if they were first acknowledged. Ignoring them only invited greater destruction. He approached his family with that lesson in mind. Instead of burying what had happened, they spoke about it honestly. Sometimes those conversations ended with tears. Sometimes they ended with silence. But little by little, they ended with understanding instead of resentment. One of the first changes Ifeanyi made was to reduce the amount of time he spent traveling. When his company offered him another long-distance assignment, he requested a position supervising projects within Lagos instead. His supervisor looked surprised. You've always accepted the difficult assignments. I know. This promotion comes with higher pay. I understand. Then why refuse? Ifeanyi smiled politely. Because there are people at home who need me more than another promotion. His supervisor studied him for a moment before nodding. I respect that. Although the new role paid slightly less, it allowed him to return home every evening. For the first time in years, the family ate dinner together almost every night. Those simple meals slowly became the foundation of their healing. Mama Ngozi's health also improved steadily. Regular medication eased the pain in her knees. The doctor encouraged gentle walks each morning, and Ifeanyi insisted on accompanying her whenever his schedule allowed. They often strolled through the neighborhood just after sunrise, while the streets remained quiet. One morning, Mama Chinyere spotted them walking together. She smiled warmly. "It is good to see both of you." Ifeanyi embraced her respectfully. "Auntie, thank you." She looked puzzled. "For what?" "For caring about my mother when I wasn't here." Mama Chinyere smiled gently. "I only did what any neighbors should do." "No." He shook his head. "You paid attention when I failed to." She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You didn't fail. You were working. What matters is that you listened when the truth finally reached you." He never forgot those words. Inside the house, Amara was quietly rebuilding trust in ways that required no speeches. She stopped trying to control every decision. She invited Mama Ngozi's opinions before making changes around the home. She insisted that household responsibilities be shared instead of placing them on one person. Most importantly, she stopped seeing kindness as weakness. Every apology she offered was matched by changed behavior. Mama Ngozi noticed. She never demanded perfection. She simply watched for sincerity. One afternoon, Amara entered the sitting room carrying 2 cups of tea. "I thought we could sit together." Mama Ngozi smiled. "I'd like that." They spent nearly an hour talking. Not about property, not about the past. They spoke about recipes, church activities, the flowers blooming in the garden. Ordinary conversations that had once seemed impossible now felt precious. Before leaving the room, Amara hesitated. "Mama." "Yes." "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me the chance to become better, instead of only reminding me who I had been." Mama Ngozi reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "We all hope someone will give us that chance one day." Meanwhile, the property documents remained exactly where they belonged, locked safely inside the small metal box that had once belonged to Ifeanyi's father. No one mentioned transferring ownership again. The subject no longer mattered. The family had discovered that peace inside a home was worth far more than ownership papers stored inside a drawer. Several months later, the church organized a community outreach program for elderly people living alone. Volunteers delivered food, cleaned houses, and helped repair damaged roofs for widows who had no close relatives. Without hesitation, Ifeanyi registered his family to participate. On the first Saturday of the program, they visited an elderly man named Papa Samuel. His children had moved abroad years earlier. Although they occasionally sent money, no one had visited him in nearly 3 years. His small house showed signs of neglect. The roof leaked. The front steps had cracked. The garden had become overgrown. As Ifeanyi repaired loose roofing sheets with other volunteers, Mama Ngozi prepared lunch inside the house. Amara quietly swept the compound and planted fresh flowers near the entrance. Papa Samuel watched everything with moist eyes. "I didn't expect strangers to care." Ifeanyi smiled. "We aren't strangers anymore." The elderly man nodded slowly. "No, we're family today." Those words touched everyone present. On the drive home, the family remained unusually quiet. Finally, Amara spoke. "I keep thinking about something." "What is it?" Ifeanyi asked. "If no one had stopped me." She looked down at her hands. "I might have become someone incapable of recognizing another person's pain." Mama Ngozi answered softly. "The important thing is that you recognize it now." "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never forget." She kept that promise. Over the following years, she became one of the church's most active volunteers, particularly helping elderly widows who often felt invisible. Whenever someone thanked her, she always answered the same way. "I was once shown mercy when I least deserved it." Only her family understood the full meaning behind those words. One evening, nearly a year after everything had changed, the three of them sat together beneath the old mango tree, the same tree where Ifeanyi had once blamed himself, the same courtyard where painful truths had finally come into the light. Children from neighboring houses laughed as they chased one another down the street. The sound filled the evening air with life. Mama Ngozi looked at her son and daughter-in-law sitting beside her. Her heart felt lighter than it had in many years. "We've been blessed," she said quietly. Ifeanyi nodded. "Not because life became perfect." Amara smiled. "But because we finally learned that love cannot survive without truth." Mama Ngozi looked toward the branches above them. "And truth without forgiveness leaves only broken hearts." The three of them sat together until the sun slowly disappeared beyond the rooftops of Lagos. The house remained exactly where it had always stood, not because documents protected it, but because the people living inside had finally remembered what truly made it a home. Every family will face moments when silence seems easier than honesty. Yet silence that hides suffering rarely protects the people we love. Real love requires the courage to ask difficult questions, the humility to admit painful mistakes, and the grace to forgive when genuine repentance appears. Wealth can build larger houses, but only kindness, respect, and truth can build a lasting home. If we choose compassion over pride and people over possessions, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you to check on the people you love, especially those who quietly carry burdens they never speak about. Sometimes a simple conversation can change a life. Thank you for watching. Please share this story with someone who believes that family is worth fighting for, and don't forget to subscribe and join us for more inspiring stories.